Welcome, everyone, to this episode of your Freedom Hub's Free Market Cash Patient. I am your host, Jeff Cantor, along with Charles Froman. We're definitely sponsored by the Marketplace for Health, Wealth, and Freedom, which is at your-mp.com, where we are the disruptors intersection. You'll definitely find out that there's a problem in the healthcare world out there. We keep trying to expose it all the time, and most people start to figure that out. So we're going to try to bypass that little middle entity, which actually can put a bunch of different labels on that person in the middle. But the key is getting back to the doctor-patient relationship, which it's all about me being sick, and it's all about that person helping me. Why is there anybody else in here? So, and again, all the information that's floating around, is it accurate? Who do you believe? It changes around. And then on the sidebar, before we got to get into today, just to remind everybody, we do have a separate program that's much more into all issues of freedom, and we run that at 4:00. So we'd encourage you to join that and catch some of it in the reruns. And then again, we want to induce you to come take a look at the site. It's a part of the show you sort of need to, because when you get over here, you'll see there's a lot of great stuff to investigate. We do have the tab here under Home about webinars. And then the other one, very importantly, is continuing the conversation. So tonight's no exception. After you're done hearing about the topic, you may very want to connect with that person. And here's your way to do it. You'll come in here and there's a lot, and you'll see what I mean. When you're on the webinar site, as it were, and you go past the breakout of who's the day, come down here, who's coming up, and then very importantly down here where these videos are archived. So here's an example. If we clicked on this Brighteon link, it take you over here. You'll see there's a wealth of information, a lot of great people to connect with after the conversation. And so you'll see what you want to engage in and help participate in. The other thing I did want to reiterate also is that we had that freedom tab. Here we have the fighting for freedom, and that's where there's issues to be aware of, as well as organizations fighting to help further the freedom that we all cherish. So this is great. So, but on that note, let's kind of dig into today's routine. And here's where I'm going to let Charles jump in here real quick and give us a rundown on our guest, Scott.
Gladly, Jeff and Scott, welcome. It's a thrill for me to introduce an HSA topic, because that goes back a long way, apparently for both Scott and me. When I was a young Republican congressional staffer in the early 90s, forced to learn the health issue because President Clinton's wife wanted to, as Doug Bandow, my later Cato colleague, said, cram everyone into HMOs and cap pricing with Medicare price controls. We had to learn a Republican alternative. Heritage first gave us an individualization idea to junk the group market and get everyone, chipping into the competition needed by becoming an individual consumer. And we liked that idea, but then this guy named John Goodman educated us about medical savings accounts, and we all loved that idea too. And then Jack Strayer had a group council for affordable health insurance, and a bunch of us on the Hill just loved these free market solutions that were really catching on. I formed an innovations hearing for a now defunct Republican committee called the Research Committee. Brought up Ken Davis from Dominion Resources, who was an early purveyor of some form of medical savings account. It wasn't really tax advantage back in the early 90s at that point, I don't think, but they were trying the concept at Dominion, the big energy monopoly here in Virginia. And I ended up working for a congressman in the mid 90s who was the prime sponsor of the medical savings account that was introduced actually by a Democrat, Andy Jacobs, an Indiana Democrat, who I think introduced it because one of his constituents was Pat Rooney, who ran Golden Rule Insurance Company, which for about a decade was the insurance company whose policy you bought if you wanted a health savings account. Later, after I wasn't really involved with the issue, health savings accounts passed in Congress and proliferated in the market. And 2 decades later, I'm working with Jeff Canner, and John Goodman at Forbes calls us about this sharing market that he and I are involved with. And John includes our brokerage as one of the best Obamacare alternatives because we package sharing with HSAs. And about a year ago, we had on this webinar one of Scott's former colleagues from his company, Pat Jarrett, present what they call the investors HSA, because a problem with HSAs, as good as they are with tens of millions of users, the people understand that. Jeff and I still get customers who confuse them with flexible spending accounts, which are use it or lose it. But most folks get the value of the HSA, so they're okay with it. Unfortunately, most of them are still spending them down and not really availing themselves of the investment opportunity that's going to help you get that 100 grand by retirement, which is when you need the HSA money for long-term care costs and Medicare gaps. And now with the list bill that we can offer employers with 49 employees or less, which is a simple filling out a census form, we're about to go crazy with the small group market, an easy online form for customers, really cheap but effective sharing with the HSA or a DPC, which Scott also is an expert in. We're really looking forward to getting the HSA out there in the small group market. So Scott was also there back in the 90s with all these early proselytizers of the tax-deferred health savings account. He knows all the players. He's been in the business training people how to sell this, mainly out of Kansas. And that's why they hired him, the Richmond company, to run their promotions and sales with increasingly bigger companies. He's also an expert in DPC, where you pay a monthly fee to a primary care doc to cover all your basic preventive services and things you otherwise would go to an urgent care for. So that's our intro, Jeff.
All right, Scott, here we go. I'm going to give you the screen.
All right. Well, it's an honor to be here. Always glad to talk about health savings accounts. I've been on the healthcare consumerism bandwagon since I found medical savings accounts. I think it was 1998. It came out in 1997. So a lot of the word tracks that I talk about today are literally 24, 23 years old now. I've been saying the same thing, talking about at the center of healthcare consumerism is the health savings account. Imagine if everyone in the country had a vested interest in not spending their own healthcare dollars, and that's what a health savings account offers. So a lot of my passion and my mission talks about aligned incentives. And that's why I'm very passionate about direct primary care. I actually have been doing talk radio here in Kansas City and on some national shows for 17 years, something like that, since HSAs first came out in 2004. So a little over 17 years now. Huge advocate of the whole healthcare consumerism ecosystem. We want to design an ecosystem with aligned incentives, and at the root of it is a health savings account where people have a vested interest in not spending their own healthcare dollars. So there's lots of different ways they can go. They told me to try to keep it under 30 minutes, right at 30 minutes. So I'd like to start maybe, thank you for the introduction. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. It's amazing what can happen when like-minded people get together and really start brainstorming and putting their heads together. And the healthcare sharing ministry marketplace is something that needed to happen when the Affordable Care Act forced all of these mandates on the individual marketplace. Especially, it made those plans cost, as of now in most parts of the country, the individual rates now cost more than the group rates do, versus prior to the Affordable Care Act, when there was an underwriting process. The individual rates a lot of times were half or a third as much as the group marketplace. But guaranteed issue, trying to make the individual marketplace cover everything, ended up being detrimental to the individual marketplace. So the healthcare sharing ministry allows people to still have affordable care. Of course, we can't call it insurance, so on and so forth. But when it comes to health savings accounts, there's lots of things that people really don't understand. And you're exactly right as far as people still misunderstanding the health savings account. They still think it's use it or lose it. They still think, wait, if I have medical expenses, I can put it through an HSA. So they're going to save federal taxes everywhere. And most states are going to give you state tax deduction by putting money through your health savings account. So even though that's fantastic, the real magic happens when people save their HSA for the long term. And in fact, at Health Savings, we have been the investor-focused HSA now since HSAs first came out in 2004. For 17 years, investment advisors have really turned to us because of our education. So that's one thing I kind of wanted to share with you to get started, was a long-term savings strategy using your health savings account. And it focuses on a little tool that you might not think of as an HSA tool, but we're going to talk about a shoebox here.
This is a shoebox. Its primary purpose is obviously to contain shoes. This is also an amazing but underutilized retirement savings tool. Yes, a shoebox. When paired with a health savings account, HSA, this shoebox offers the very best ways to maximize your retirement savings dollars. Here's how. You already know HSAs offer tax savings like no other tool under the current tax code. Contributions to your HSA are pre-tax or tax deductible. Interest earned is tax-free, and so are withdrawals for eligible medical expenses. Plus, the money rolls over year after year and is portable. Hang on, shoebox, we're getting to you. So one strategy is to invest your HSA dollars for long-term tax-free growth, rather than using them to pay for current medical expenses. You know, treat your HSA like a medical IRA. Then at age 65, you've got choices. You can still pay medical expenses tax-free, or you can use your HSA to pay for non-medical expenses, because penalties for those types of withdrawals are lifted at age 65. Or, and this is your shining moment, shoebox, if you've paid for qualified medical expenses out of pocket over the years, leaving your HSA untouched and storing those receipts in the proverbial shoebox or app or whatever, you can reimburse yourself tax-free years later and spend the money on whatever you choose. Period. End of story. So this shoebox paired with this HSA can be your ticket to buying a boat or vacation property or whatever strikes your fancy during retirement. It's not just a shoebox, it's not just a health savings account. When it comes to creating a holistic retirement savings strategy, make sure you're thinking inside the shoebox.
I'm shocked because let me back up a little bit. At Health Savings, I work with the employer group through the broker community. And I'm shocked at how many benefit brokers, benefit advisors still don't understand just that little minute 42-second video that you can use an HSA as a long-term investment tool. You can put the money in the market. Yes, it goes in pre-tax, earns interest tax-free, and you can spend it on medical expenses at some point in time, whether it's this year, next year, or 20 years from now into retirement. It's estimated if a couple were to retire today, they're going to need nearly $300,000 to pay for those future medical expenses, that unreimbursed medical expenses that Medicare is not going to cover. Why aren't we putting back pre-tax or tax deductible money now in our maximum wage earning years to pay for those future medical expenses? And people aren't getting that message. So through Health Savings, they brought me on board to bring that message to the employer group market. But I guess you guys already had a longstanding communication and relationship with Health Savings because of our investment advice, our education that we bring to the table is winning awards, just like this short little video. It changes people. It's an aha moment when people think, wait a second, really? Yes. So if you have $100 in your HSA, you can use it to pay for $100 worth of medical expenses this year. But if you let that money grow in the market, and we have lots of different very low cost investment options available to let that money actually earn true market returns, because I'm sorry, the government can't be spending as much as we're spending right now without inflation happening, and the fixed accounts aren't keeping up with inflation. So you're actually theoretically losing money in a health savings account based upon the inflation factor, unless you've got it in the market. Now, of course, the market, you can lose some money up and down, so on and so forth, but historically speaking, you're going to win more than you lose when you have the money in the market. So by doing that strategy, letting that money grow in your HSA year after year, paying for your eligible medical expenses elsewhere, and keeping those receipts. Now, I don't use a shoebox because I see how the receipts can fade over time. I take a picture of them with my phone and I email them to, I set up a Gmail account, and I just use that Gmail account then, my HSA receipts, whatever, at gmail.com, boom, done. And so that's the way I send up my HSA receipts. I figured Google's probably going to be around longer than our government is, right? So if I use a Gmail account, I think I'm pretty safe there. But that's one way to make sure that that I keep those receipts long-term. So eventually, let's say after 20 years, I've got $35,000 worth of medical receipts. I can in lump sum take $35,000 out of my HSA. And if the IRS audits me and says, hey, you just took $35,000 out, where are your receipts? Well, here they are from 2020, 2021, 2022, so on and so forth. Because every medical receipt is your ticket for tax-free withdrawals out of your HSA account whenever you choose to take the money out. There is no time limit on it. So I'm shocked at how few people know that side of the HSA. So yes, you can use an HSA to pay for $100 worth of medical expenses this year. But if you have the money growing in the marketplace and it doubles or triples in time, you can use that same $100 in your HSA to pay for $300 worth of medical expenses, or $200 or $500 worth of medical expenses in the long haul. So people are not leveraging their HSA properly. Historically speaking, I think less than 7% of HSA account holders actually have any money in the market at all. That's where health savings changes that whole narrative. By educating people, people will start looking at the HSA as a way to supplement and use it as an additional retirement tool. That's why our average HSA account balance is over $11,000 versus the industry average is $2,000. And by the way, our expense ratios in our investment options are 75% under the industry average. We actually provide a health savings account that investment advisors don't mind. They're not embarrassed at the super high fees that some of our competition has out there with their fees. So anyway, with that being said, the HSA works great as a put and take account to pay for today's medical expenses with pre-tax money. For most Americans, it's like a 20 to 30% savings just buying things they're currently paying for through a health savings account. It's better if you leave it for the long term, though. That's the magic. That's when the magic really happens. Getting that message out there is my mission. I've been passionate about it. We still have to work on some of the legislative rules that are limiting direct primary care to be used and paid for along with the HSA and the high deductible health plan. So that's something else that we've been working on for quite a while. We need some changes there. And I think simply if we could decouple the HSA requirement to be coupled with a high deductible health plan, that would allow a lot more freedom and a lot more usage of the health savings accounts, and a lot more people then could be saving money on taxes. And so that's kind of been my mission for a long time. How do we align incentives? What's available today for employers? What's available for individuals? What can we do to stop giving all the money to the insurance companies year after year? Because in a healthy year, how much of that money do you get back? None. Okay, let's take on a higher deductible, eliminate those co-pays to cover things you can really afford to pay on your own anyway, right? I mean, your auto insurance doesn't cover your windshield wiper blades and oil changes. Why are we asking our health insurance to cover the smaller medical bills? We shouldn't be doing that. We should be using, as your earlier illustration, get the insurance company out from between the physician and the patient. Let's open those lines up. So I don't know how this normally goes. I can continue talking about the HSA background, so on and so forth, and what needs to happen for hours. And I know we only have about 10 minutes left of this. I wanted to open this up. Does anyone have any questions about health savings accounts? I am the HSA guy. I mean, I've had this license plate since 2007. My wife got that for me, and I, as you can tell, super passionate about health savings accounts. I can talk about the facts and how it works. But while I have some very influential people on the call here today, are there any specific questions any of you have that you would like me to potentially answer? And we can make this more of an interactive conversation.
Sure.
I have a question, Dave Westbrook. I have a comment and a question. First of all, I've had an HSA for 25 years at least. In fact, when I ran for Congress, that was really the heart of my campaign, was to get away from insurance companies and get into HSAs. And in fact, I formed a company to do that. And HSAs are at the heart of my company, Consumer First Digital Health Network. But my question is whether or not, when were you able to take tax deductions if you're on Medicare? Because I've had an HSA sitting there, but I have not filed, I haven't used it I've used it for health expenses, but when did that change? I had no idea.
Well, in order to be eligible to put money into an HSA, you have to, A, not be enrolled in Medicare.
Well,
B,
that's
you
what
have
I'm saying. So it's still, you still can't get tax deductibility for Medicare if you're
correct. So after you turn 65 or enrolled in Medicare, you can no longer put more money into your HSA, but you can still spend it down for your eligible medical expenses.
Right.
So that is still in place. So I didn't make that clear. You can't put new monies in.
Exactly.
But if it's still earning money in the market, you can do that, and then you can spend it down, or you can just take it out. If you take it out, the 20% penalty goes away, but you can still take it out and it would be taxable income. But for most people, it makes more sense to leave it in your HSA after retirement and use it to pay for unreimbursed medical expenses, including dental, vision. You can use it to pay for your Medicare Part B. You can't use it to pay for a Medicare supplement. But you can use it to pay for long-term care. There's lots of eligible expenses on the 213D or publication 502 that if you want to look it up, that you're able to pay for and use your HSA funds or use those expenses to reimburse yourself out of your HSA.
I see.
Very good. Scott, this is Jeff. That was great. Having been involved with the HSAs when they first hit the market as an insurance product, it was interesting. Most people are so focused on the insurance and saving money because the insurance was cheaper. They never really even opened up the HSA half the time, or if they did, they put in like $25 or whatever's the bare minimum, and they never funded the thing ever. Or if they did, it just sat idle in a zero interest checking account. So nobody really was excited about it because they weren't looking at it for the long term. And then the biggest thing, like you pointed out, and I almost forgot to think about it, was that you don't have to reimburse the bills immediately. Everybody thinks, oh, I get my Flex account, I get a bill, I pay it. But like you said, you can just stockpile those bills for years and years and years and then pay yourself one big lump sum later. But meanwhile, you can build it all up. A guy that I had met years later had a self-directed HSA, and he put $2,000 in there and bought and rehabbed homes until he parlayed it up to over $1 million in that account off of a $2,000 investment. All that growth tax-free, 100%. So
I've never heard of anyone getting their HSA up to $1 million, but congratulations.
Remarkable, but it just goes to show the power of this tool. And what you're doing is you're making it so accessible for the average person who doesn't have the time or inclination to learn all the ins and outs of it, to allow them to have great success if they just follow a ridiculously simple strategy. Like you said, 1:43 could change your whole life. So that's great. Charles, I see your hand is up.
It is. Scott, a couple questions. Is there a elevator pitch that you use when trying to help folks understand in an easy way what expenses are eligible and which are not? That's always a hard one to remember, even as an agent, because the 213D list at IRS is, as you would expect, in government speak, is long-winded, confusing, and they should be able to simplify it, don't you think?
Of course, but due to the pandemic, they actually added quite a few things to HSA eligible. So right now we have a slight variation between what's HSA eligible and then some of the other, like flexible spending accounts, for example, you can use them to pay for daycare, childcare, commuter expenses, so on and so forth. So there's a slight variation between them, but publication 502 is where the government puts those changes in there. So is there a simple version of that? Not really. Anything that's going to count towards your medical deductible, that's going to count. And I could get into HSA contribution limits and so on and so forth. And I don't know if in this short of a period of time, I don't think we want to get that far into the weeds. How much you can put in, what qualifies as a high deductible health plan, all these kind of qualifications are all listed out. But publication 502 is the best place to go. So anything counts toward your insurance deductible. Prescription glasses. I just purchased a pair of prescription sunglasses, so I'm able to use those, pay for those out of my HSA. Even though my vision insurance covered part of the cost, the part that I had to pay for, I was able to pay for out of an HSA. And here's another thing. A lot of people don't understand this. If an employer group puts a health savings account in place, and then let's say the family is covered elsewhere, the spouse has other insurance that is not the IRS specific HSA qualified high deductible health plan, and maybe the kids don't have the high deductible health plan either. The insured person on the high deductible health plan with the HSA can use their HSA dollars to pay for the spouse or dependent children's medical expenses with pre-tax dollars, and they don't even know that. It's amazing. It's like, wait a second. So I can use my HSA to pay for my spouse's co-pays on her copay plan? Yes, you can. Or, for example, I'll use a live example here. My daughter and her husband and my grandkids are on a healthcare sharing ministry plan right now. He just received a job offer. I hope I'm not breaking the news here. I shouldn't get in trouble. I'm not going to give you his name or the company name, but he just received a job offer where he's going to have employer group health insurance plan. And odds are, the way I've spoken with him, I suggested that he goes on the group health insurance plan with the HSA. My daughter and the kids, and by the way, the healthcare sharing ministry is going to cover her pregnancy. I got my 4th grandchild on the way through them, by the way, and there's only $300 share out of their pocket to cover maternity. There's no way his group health insurance is going to cover it that well. So they're going to stay on the healthcare sharing ministry. He's going to have the HSA and be able to pay that $300 plus any other expenses for the rest of the family out of his HSA with pre-tax money. People don't know they can do that. They don't always have access to an HSA guy. They don't have, in my opinion, proper education about the many ways you can leverage health savings accounts. And that's why I was so impressed with health savings administrators. What they've done is they've identified 6 different personas, from the spenders to the savers to the investors, and the different personality traits that are out there, very common for HSA account holders. And we have messaging that's dedicated to each one to make sure each one of them can maximize their HSA. That's why we get so many more people investing and putting money back. I showed you that slide just a couple minutes ago. Over 50% of people with a high deductible health plan have not even put in $1 in the last year. What good is triple tax advantages if you're not putting any money into it? And an example I've used before, it's like, okay, I have a fantastic car, but no one told me I needed to put gasoline in it. They work better with fuel, people. So an HSA doesn't work very well if you're not putting the money into it, letting the money grow and go to work for you, and then pay for your eligible expenses you're already paying for with pre-tax money. It's a fun conversation. It requires education. We're winning awards for our education. We're winning awards for dedicated account manager service that we're doing for group sizes that most other HSA administrators aren't willing to do. And I think education is key, and we knocked that one out of the park.
That's it 100%, frankly, because, all the stuff that everybody does know what to do and all about are the ones that cost them money or there's no benefit to them. But this, which is like out there, it's almost a little like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. You've got this killer thing and you're not even using it at all.
20 to 30% savings. And from my understanding, last statistics I heard, only 17% of what Americans pay out of pocket for medical expenses are going through a pre-tax mechanism like an HSA or a flexible spending account. Now, I happen to like HSAs a lot more because I don't like to use it or lose it. And the employee never owns their flexible spending account, versus as soon as that money goes into the HSA, the employee owns it. And people treat their own money differently. So because of that, only 17% of what Americans are paying for, they're getting a 20 to 30% discount. Let's just at least get that message out there, people. Why are we giving the government more money than we need to? Let's change that.
It's silly, but I think one of the things that'll break it open is when you made that comment about separating it from health insurance. Why can't seniors buy one of these and fund it? Why does somebody, I don't want any insurance. I just want to have a mechanism to have money available to me, just like anyone can buy an IRA. So yeah, that doesn't seem to make sense. And I think that'll probably get more people investing and using them if the broader audience knew they were out there and could get a hold of them. So that's exciting to hear that's happening. Is there some legislation or something that's starting to make that maybe a reality?
There's been different pieces of legislation, and I'm actually very disappointed in the first 2 years of the Trump administration, because there's been some legislation that was out there that was pushed, that was bipartisan to some degree, and it was never able to make it through both chambers of Congress, and so it never made it through. But there's been lots of attempts at decoupling the HSA from the high deductible health plan, of allowing direct primary care to be listed as a 213D or publication 502 eligible expense. Right now, they're still trying to call it insurance, and that's a whole different conversation that is very frustrating. But we need to get that to happen. We've got to get insurance out from between the physician and the patient. Fee-for-service primary care just does not work. And like I said, like you mentioned before, I'd love to have that conversation. And that could go for way more than an hour. It's a
You're
fun
right about
conversation
that.
talking about the broken fee-for-service and how primary care physicians, as a whole, in my opinion, are the most abused part of that fee-for-service system out there.
Sadly true.
I'd like to make a comment on that and see
Please.
what you have in terms of, hopefully you're doing some lobbying in that regard. But Congressman Davidson from Ohio and Senator Cruz both have had bills in the last Congress that would expand HSAs and expand the scope of them. Actually, the Trump administration's done quite a bit when you look at putting associations under the banner of self-insurance so that HSAs become much more feasible and they could actually avoid some of the Obamacare restrictions. So that's the direction I think we're going. Unfortunately, with all the nonsense that's going in Washington, you can't trust Republicans as well as you can't, and certainly can't trust Democrats. But I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or if you all have done any lobbying in that regard, any progress reports on reintroduction of those two bills or anything else that's going on.
I do know the previous CEO of Health Savings is now joined the HSA for All movement. So there's been a whole lot going on. I'm not super on top of how the most recent movements of what's going on, but I do know that Health Savings Administrators is leading the pack and really trying to drive that movement so that, like Ben Carson said years and years ago, everyone needs to be born with Social Security and a HSA card. And then we're starting off in the right direction. I couldn't agree more.
Very good. Charles, I see your hand is up.
Jeff, I'd like to put some of our friends on the spot who have good questions brewing in their heads. Bob Staubel, for example, has been speaking to us, Jeff, about bigger groups using HSAs and HRAs and how they combine. A conversation that's a bit over my head, but it sounds good. Bob, would you be willing to unmute and kind of rephrase that kind of big group saving strategy that you've been talking about? If you're there, Bob.
If he's not there, I think I can address it and we can talk about it.
Go for it.
Okay. It's the May 11th guidance. You guys can look it up. I don't have it pulled up on my computer right now, but May 11th of 2004. I remember that day. That's when the guidance came from the Treasury Department. So if you Google that, May 11th, 2004, United States Treasury guidance, HSA, HRA, and flexible spending, FSA, flexible spending account. That was the day that they allowed post-deductible health reimbursement arrangement to work with a health savings account. They also allowed, that was the first time I'd ever heard the term of a limited flexible spending account covering dental and vision. And so it really opens the door for all kinds of ingenuity, if you will. And let's add, I've said for years, HSAs give people the why to save money. What's been missing is the how to save money. But when you can do what's called a post-deductible health reimbursement arrangement, so that, okay, you might be purchasing the insurance component that has a $3,000, $5,000, $6,000 deductible. This year it can be up to $7,000 out of pocket. So you're purchasing that on the insurance part, but then the employer can decide, hey, I'm going to do a post-deductible health reimbursement arrangement. It can't start to pay prior to the HSA qualified limitation of $1,400 individual and $2,800 family. But then the employer can say anything between that, between the $1,400 and the $5,000 or $7,000, the employer picks that up through a self-funding type commitment. That actually works very well, especially if you have fully insured groups with one employee that has some health conditions, one or a very limited number of employees with health conditions. That's the way I've actually set some of these plans up before, and it works extremely well to save that employer a whole lot of premium on the rest of the employees. And then you're going to lose money off the unhealthy ones, but if it's a very small number, the overall savings can be substantial. So you can layer these in. And now a kind of more ingenious program is layering that post-deductible health reimbursement arrangement, layering that together with a price transparency tool. I heard you guys mention Healthcare Blue Book. There's someone else that you might want to look at getting on this channel talking about disruptions. and that would be Talon. I don't know if you're familiar with My Medical Shopper in Talon, but we were scheduled to present at a very large presentation in California last year before COVID hit, and we were going to present HSA 2.0. And the 2.0 is a way to leverage price transparency tool and reward employees for going to higher value physician providers. For example, all people know is to go in network, but in network at the hospital sometimes can cost 10 times as much as in network at an outpatient facility, especially if you're talking about a CT scan or so on and so forth, or surgical center. You guys probably very familiar with Dr. Smith over at Oklahoma Surgical Center. His cost compared to the insurance discounted rate is huge. So why not reward employees and give them a reward for going to the higher value physicians, the facilities? And if they do that right now, all they know is to go in network, and they could be spending, and the employer can be losing a whole lot of money. So with self-funded employer groups, what we're putting together is a way of layering it so that, yeah, if you go to the higher cost facilities, you're going to pay your full deductible coinsurance copays out of pocket. However, if you go to a higher value facility and that employer can save this certain particular dollar amount, then the employer can select to, it doesn't have to. The employer can choose to pass some of that savings on to the employee through a post-deductible health reimbursement arrangement. That to me is exciting. That's actually having employees become active participants in the healthcare plan instead of, as I call it, copay paying bystanders. So I pay a copay, somebody else pays the rest of the bill. I don't know what the cost is. I don't care what the cost is. It's about time I get to use my insurance plan. That encourages people to overspend their healthcare dollars. And that's one of the big problems in our healthcare system today. We've got to get rid of that. We need them to be active participants. So yes, Bob, I don't know if that answered your question, but we need to talk. I can tell. We're going to have some conversations about how HSAs work proactively in the employer group marketplace. I don't care if you're talking about reference-based pricing, direct contracting, if you're talking about price transparency tools, it can all work within the HSA framework. And I'd love to speak to anyone that wants to talk about how to build a truly aligned incentive. What I mentioned it before, a healthcare consumerism ecosystem with aligned incentives. It's out there. We can do it. At the root of it, in my opinion, is the health savings account.
Yep. And it is, like you said, it's a very simple, all the things that you need to do it are already right there. You just line them all up and off we go. Well, I see Jim is here trying to preempt Charles, putting him on the spot by asking his own questions. So Jim, go ahead.
Yes, that's right. No, that's not at all. Actually, great presentation, Scott. No, I didn't know a lot of this about the HSAs. I wish I knew you 20 years ago. So a question. One thing is that surprised me also. 300,000, is that what you said is needed? You know, kind of the end of your later in life for an average for people to cover.
Fidelity came up with that estimate, and so I don't mind quoting it because they did their research. I did not do the research.
So, I mean, to me, I hear that probably like everyone else and go, wow, that's kind of appalling. We must not be doing something right if we have to spend this much money to be healthy down the road, which is the project I'm working on, of course, and in general. I mean, but that's a sobering number that if more people knew that, I suppose, and knew about HSAs and other avenues, they would be going that route and probably trying to live healthier, so to stay healthy, so they could keep all that HSA money for that vacation, for the yacht, whatever they want, the second home, and they're not going to need it because they're doing well and they don't need to spend a lot of money on their health. Question though related is, are there any other videos? I loved your little 1 minute, video. Anything else you guys have out that is I could look at, maybe even point people towards to get a better understanding or to share some of this?
We've got all kinds of information on our website. It's healthsavings.com. It's about as simple as you can possibly get. Healthsavings.com. Lots of information based for individuals, for employer groups, and investment advisors, which has kind of been our background for 17 plus years now, is working through investment advisors to make sure people are investing through their HSA.
And real quick, what's the problem with the DPC payouts, or why isn't that? What's the eligibility issue as you see it right now?
The direct primary care, especially in the group marketplace, Congress and legislators have decided to call it insurance, so it doesn't meet the qualification for a high deductible health plan because it has upfront benefits before the minimum deductible has been satisfied. So because of that, you cannot pair the direct primary care insurance plan, and I disagree wholeheartedly with it being insurance.
Yeah, right.
But it's just a physician payment. So, but they're calling it insurance, so that by default eliminates them from being on a high deductible health plan. Therefore, in their eyes, they're not able to put money into a health savings account.
Who's lobbying against that the most? Insurance? The BUCAs? I mean,
against
well, who doesn't want to see that regulation changed?
Yeah, of course, the BUCAs, the insurance companies want their talons between, and they want to be able to control that narrative. And of course, processing claims generates revenue. So
right. Okay.
Every time they can process a claim, if they're pulled out of that connection between a physician and the patient, then they stop gaining their revenue.
Right. No, that's not good. I see. Okay. Hey, thank you.
No problem.
From us having sold people that have insurance with an HSA and then they come over to our program before we have this HSA built in, they would, to go to a DPC even, they can use the money out of it to spend for expenses that the doctor generates for them, but they can no longer fund that HSA. So yeah, it's a sad situation. I think, Charles, did you have your hand up again, I think?
I did, and I do. Just a clarification that how we combine sharing with HSAs is we add and embed in our package a high deductible MEC, a minimal essential coverage piece that qualifies it both as compliant with the ACA and for an HSA. And we did that with 2 sharing companies. And so there are workarounds that exist. Also, just a comment that, we also embed that combo with an app for cash appointments called the WOW app. So we definitely are trying to grow the cash paying space in any way we can. Finally, Janice Powers, Jeff, has a question if you want to unmute her.
Absolutely.
I know she presented half a year ago on her, I think it was a wellness app of some kind, but she flirted with HSA entrepreneurship in some way. So Janice, welcome back.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, Scott, this was great. I'm a huge HSA fan, and thank you for having me on the show back in the day. I don't know you, Scott, but we're all on the same page of, knowing that the insurance model right now doesn't work. And about 2 years ago, I published a book called Healthcare Meet the American Dream. And it was a proposal to eliminate health insurance altogether and decentralize it by predicting outcomes. And I've spent about 2 years trying to go to market with this concept, which is really hard to do. And I was on the show, a while back, pitching sort of a preventive care app, doing these predictions and trying to sell it through a preventive care, like an automated care model. That didn't get traction. Doctors didn't like it. It was hard to monetize. And so then I looked at becoming an HSA and sort of bolting on this predictive tool for our customers and saying, we can help you control your expenses by telling you what's going to happen. And then sort of pricing it out for them using local market pricing, with these price transparency tools to try and, just sort of get our finger into the financing of it somehow. And I wound up abandoning that. And this is sort of, I don't want to rain on everyone's parade here, but when I went out to sell this to people, we all understand how awesome these tools are. And we are highly educated health consumers. The rest of the world is not. And so the problem that people have with this stuff is the biggest thing I heard from people. And by the way, HSAs are awesome. I wish that you didn't have to have a high deductible plan to have them. I think that would be the best way to have more people embrace them, like hands down. I think that's the key legislative thing that needs to happen. But just so you know, what I heard from people is that first of all, the amount of money every year, especially if you're single, isn't a lot. So they're like, oh, I'm going to save, potentially, 30% on $3,500, when they're trying to max out their 401k. So they don't see the dollar value because they're not savvy investors. So that's one problem. They do not understand price transparency at all. It doesn't exist. Healthcare Blue Book is a useless tool. People don't use CPT codes to go look stuff up, and they can't understand the whole suite of CPT codes they're going to need for a treatment. It's fine to start off with the commoditized stuff like labs and CAT scans. But even if you get your CAT scan from somewhere that is cheaper, that place is probably not integrated with your doctor. So then you got to go get the damn thing, and that, and the doctor's ticked off because they didn't order it. And so there's just, the barriers that we're aware of that make this difficult. But, I had to walk away from it and say, the best thing that I can do as an entrepreneur is educate people and make them better healthcare consumers so they can use these products. So we're now, we just focused on doing the predictions, because that's for us going to be, the differentiator. There's so many cool HSA tools, like whatever you're doing is way better than what we could do. Right. But I think when these things get marketed, I think we have to acknowledge how ignorant people are and how they're so turned off by the system that a lot of these things that we say are real or not, especially the price transparency and this appreciation of what their out-of-pocket spending is, because they don't get like that you can shop for maybe a carpal tunnel surgery that might be below the cost of their deductible if they go to this place. Like they can't even wrap their heads around it. So hopefully we can just get these things out in more people's hands. So that's sort of my overall comment.
When it comes to price transparency, I think there is a big, in my opinion, a huge difference between what some of the companies are doing and what My Medical Shopper, Talon, is bringing to the marketplace. First off, their price transparency is based upon 3.5 billion claims. And so it's real time, you go here, this is what your cost will be based upon your PPO network.
Yeah, but if it's a claim, right, if it's a claim, that's not a price, that's a negotiated price with the insurer. That's not a consumer price.
Correct. So with insurance, an employer can go in and leverage a tool like that and get their employees to go to the much better value places, facilities, so on and so forth, than what they would go just on their own to be in network.
Assuming that the provider is going to pay that price.
Well, right? That's pre-negotiated with the insurance. So the BUCA, and it works with BUCAs. So that works within the BUCAs. So that's already negotiated. All you're doing is shining a light on the huge price transparency, even though they're in network, between this place versus this place versus this place. If you want to go to more expensive, that's fine. You're paying your full out of pocket. But by incentivizing employees, he will do a claims analysis on certain size groups, for example, if you've got all the claims data. And it's very common. It's over 40 to around 42% potential savings for each employee based on real claims that happened in the previous year. If they had gone to another facility within 50 miles of that particular facility, that employer could have saved on total claims around 40 to 42% simply by optimizing their existing PPO network. So the employer then can decide to incentivize employees through the health reimbursement arrangement, or if there's an HSA qualified plan, through a post-deductible health reimbursement arrangement, so that the employees have a reason to use it. Because as you mentioned, a lot of the price transparency tools don't work when only 4% of the employees are even visiting the site even once.
Right. I mean, it's a tough road to hoe, and I would challenge that 42% number. I don't know that I'm sort of a data junkie, a healthcare data junkie, but I would imagine that a lot of those, that 42% benefit is coming from inpatient services that were done at a cheaper facility as opposed to the out-of-pocket deductible costs. But I may be wrong.
You would have to get a hold of Mark Galvin, Talon,
Yeah.
get a hold of him, and he would be a fantastic guest on your podcast and on this spot.
Yeah,
also, he's got a
I actually have a podcast, so he would be a cool person to talk about price transparency to sort of educate.
Yes, he would. His goal, his mission is to bring $1 trillion out of our healthcare spend. He thinks it's feasible. He thinks it's doable, and he's a data junkie too. So I think you two would hit it off.
Cool.
I have a comment on that if Janice is interested. Really what you need to do is put insurance aside. Insurance may be necessary, but it's not necessary, particularly if you have an HSA, particularly if you're self-insured. The issue that you're up against is you're looking at the universe of physicians and providers. I'm looking at establishing a network, and I have a network. That network includes all the outpatient services that you may need. So the network, not directly, but the patient, actually, we make available to them ambulatory surgical facilities, ambulatory imaging. It's not a closed network. Anybody's able to join, and going in, it's transparent. So we are going to publish all charges. The problem is that people get hung up on CPT codes. And although we need CPT codes for the insurance, it's not necessary for a patient who's getting care. What they want is they want to say, okay, I need a knee replacement. Give me a total price. That's what they do at the Oklahoma Surgical Center. Right. They include all the imaging. They include all the labs. You send them the medical records, and they do everything else. So it's not as hard as you might think. It's more difficult because the universe is so large. You have to go at each one individually, and you don't really have to do that. I think that's why I set up Consumer First, so that we can establish a network, establish doctors, other providers, and I include podiatrists and chiropractors and everybody else in that. So everything you need, and the only requirements are that you publish your prices. You charge what you want to charge.
It's a grassroots way to do it. And there are definitely providers that want to be part of that network. It's and I love that. I don't have insurance at all. I have a catastrophic plan. I pay everything out of pocket, and I do all the things that we talked about. And it's a scalability issue, and it just from a macro perspective, when you consider large employers, they're never going to do that, right? They're going to go to the big academic medical centers, and they're going to work with them. And those academic medical centers, if there are one or two players in a community, they have pricing power. They're not going to. We're going to scratch at it and slowly get there.
My feeling is I don't care about General Motors or Coca-Cola or any of the rest of them. I'm looking at employers that have 30 employees at least. And anybody above that, I have a company now that I'm working with that has 3,000 employees. It's a small employer, actually. It's a national employer, but it's actually a small, it's not, the gigantic mega company. And they're looking for a network. They say, give us a network. Fine, that's what I'm going to do.
Cool. That's in fact, like for Janice's point is so accurate, but that's really where it is going to. I've just seen from what Charles, I've been like living on the periphery and on the individual, the small business market. That's where the growth is going to come. The doctor's breaking away, and little by little, but soon enough, it's a little bit of a tidal wave. So I'm going to take a little fast detour as we kind of wind it up, because let's show a little practical world application here. This is how we're leveraging with Scott. So this is the program we've got that has a lot of stuff, and this is the stuff that got featured, like Charles was talking about, and how you manage all your different situations, how you break it up between all the availability of telemedicine today, and with this you even get mental health and life counseling, and I got to pick a mover. I'm stressing on that to help you figure out all that sort of stuff at no charge. Life care, in other words. And then, but here's where the big stuff comes in. You get that MEC, which then gives us the ability to have the health savings account, which is huge. So we satisfied the mandate in all the states that have reimposed it. And then this is like goes to what Janice was talking about and everybody else. We hold your hand every step of the way. This was the most critical part of the secret sauce because everybody said, I love everything you just told me, but I don't want to do anything. I have a job and I got kids and blah, 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 whatever. Isn't there like somebody that can do everything for me and I just like make a call? And so that's the secret thing that got built into the program because that way you're going to make them do what Dave's talking about and everybody else because everybody wants to do the right thing, but who the hell has the time? And I don't want to learn how to do it. It's not going to become a job. It's a one. I broke my leg once. I don't need to become an expert. It's going to recover. I'll never think about it again. But the doctor knows about it every day. Dave knows about it every day. Scott knows about it every day. So how do you help the consumer? And so the HSA tie-in is the way we've got that linked in similarly. Because again, we want to promote the idea that you're talking about. And again, it's all education. The luxury of what we try to do is to put it all together in one stop. So the person doesn't have to go out and buy 4 different separate things. It's all combined in one. And somebody's guiding them all the way. And then what we try to do is push them off to Scott's organization because frankly, we don't want to become experts at health savings accounts. It is such an intricate business. And you know, it's so sad about it because it's tied to health insurance like it is. No one thinks of it as anything. It's like, oh, by the way, there's an ashtray in your car. It's such a trivial thing because it's so not sold, not explained. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, this is HSA compatible. Half the people go, what's an HSA? Look, I don't even really know. No one ever uses them. But boy, the insurance is a lot less money. And that's kind of where the conversation goes. So that's kind of the whole bow here on this thing. So on that note, Scott, what would you like to do to kind of take us out here today? And I want to thank you for being here.
Well, first off, I'm honored, glad to be here. It's been fun seeing this whole progress. When MSAs first came out, I found them in 1998, and there was only 75,000 of them written between 1997 when they first came out and 2004 once the HSAs came out. And I swear I personally put about half of those on the books because everyone I talked to about triple tax advantage and how this works and saving money on insurance, right way to do insurance. It's like it makes sense. And if you're a numbers person, understand math, understand money, understand taxes, then in my opinion, everyone would want an HSA, but people don't. Janice, you're right. Education is key. We've got to get the message out there. Don't know how. I keep trying to do it through every method possible. Any employer groups want an HSA guy that really can explain all the process and put the pieces together and build a healthcare consumerism ecosystem. I first got my insurance license in 1989. I've been around a long time. I know the correct components. I'd love to work with you. Like I said, I am personally now working exclusively on the group side. So if you have employer groups that want to do this, have them contact me. Let's talk. Let's put them together. If you've got outside the box thinking brokers that are trying to really disrupt, I'd love to meet them. Let's talk. Let's talk about how HSAs fit, how they're an integral part of the healthcare consumerism scope, the way the future of healthcare, where we can salvage our private healthcare system. If this doesn't work, in my opinion, we will have a Medicare for all, a single payer. We are going to have government stepping in if we keep this current trajectory. It's not sustainable. We've got to do something. So, hey, glad to be here. It's an honor. I'd love to speak with each and every one of you. I'm a big LinkedIn fan. Make sure each one of you send me a connection request. I already sent a few out, by the way, to a couple of you that showed up early. So love to connect with you. Let's continue the conversation. Let's make it happen.